Welcome to the show. Today is January 13th, 2023. Let me start by saying I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. My name is Tony. This is Market Moves. And I am here to talk about what used to be stock symbol MMTLP and what is now the private company called NextBridge Hydrocarbons. And this presentation is called Shorts, Shorts, and More Shorts, because we'll be talking about shorts. If you do not know what stock symbol MMTLP is, I will not tell you. Instead, I will refer you to these two videos that I've made. They will be a good intro. You can have a look at MMTLP FINRA Fraud Fiasco Continues Monday. That tells you about exactly what happened, why there's a large amount of outrage in the MMTLP community, why trading was halted, a whole bunch of stuff, how trading was halted, etc. Check out that video. There's another video that tells you about the underlying value behind these assets, what the intrinsic values of these assets. That is MMTLP. The story is coming to a close. It tells you about basically 3.2 billion barrels of oil in the ground in West Texas near El Paso. There's two pipelines that are close by, natural gas and an oil pipeline. We don't even talk about the natural gas. That's worth a lot. So yeah, it's all there. Check out those two videos. They'll give you a good overview and they'll point you to other videos that will give you more information if you're interested in learning more. But they're about 20 minutes each or 30 minutes each or something like that. So I won't bore you with them because that's homework for you if you are interested and you do not know. Instead, we'll be talking about what's happening in recent news and what's been happening recently. I'll be going briefly over Rosa Twill's update. Rosa Twill had a lawsuit against FINRA for their actions causing the U3 halt. She asked for a temporary restraining order, and she got a response from the other side, being FINRA. FINRA said, "Hey, you can't, you can't be TROing us. We can't be sued. We got immunity. Congress authorized our immunity." That's what they're saying, right? Also, we didn't do you any harm, right? You go talk to NextBridge. You can get your shares that way. No harm's been done. No harm, no foul, right? And then they're also saying, hey, look, you didn't tell me what, you didn't tell me what the injury is that would be remedied if you got back to, your two trading days and we didn't halt you, okay? And doing a TRO, that ain't going to do anybody any good. Why are you even bothering? In essence, they're telling the judge, hey, who the F do you think you are? You can't sue us, you moron. We're FINRA. We've been authorized. That's what they're saying. Anyway, the judge says, oh, geez, they're FINRA. I can't touch them. Anyway, so I better not touch you. I'm not gonna authorize this TRO. Sorry, I was wrong. Maybe I can kiss your feet. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, the judge says sorry, and FINRA says, yeah. And, by the way, I'm going to give you some time to get your act together because obviously you're FINRA. And so, you need some time. We're going to grant you that time, whatever time you need, anything you need, FINRA. Yeah, whatever you need. Not a problem. Okay. Anyway, the judge says that, and he says, hey, the court date's going to be in February. And I think Rosa knew all this. She's not dumb. She's pretty smart. I think she was just trying to figure out who the opposition was, right? What game they were going to play. And to be honest, I think that's a good move, right? You got to know who your enemy is. And we found out who the enemy is. These FINRA lawyers that were presented against Rosa, they don't really know that much because they asked for immunity. FINRA only has immunity against monetary damages, and that's the way Rosa spelled out her lawsuit, right? They didn't notice that. They didn't talk at all about short interest. Short interest is what's causing all this stuff, synthetic shares. They didn't talk about the fact that they didn't talk about any of that stuff. They left it out. So Rosa's got a good idea of now, who she's up against. She had her response to their response, and she's asked for reconsideration from the judge, right? Reconsideration. She said to the judge, they don't really have immunity. They only have immunity against monetary damages. And oh, by the way, here's some case law where they actually lost a lawsuit, which they claimed immunity from, but they didn't have immunity, of course, in that case as well. And yeah, you can throw the book at him if you want. Right? She's empowering the judge. The judge just needs to, he needs to get a pair. Maybe he does have a pair. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe he needs to. Yeah. Anyway, the judge can do whatever he wants because that's the way judges are, right? Because quite frankly, if he makes an order and yeah, he can issue an order, and by the time FINRA gets to countermanding that offer or appealing that offer to the 11th Circuit Court, the 11th Circuit Court, by the way, takes up Florida cases. By the way, by the time that gets done, pushed up to the 11th Circuit Court, it'll be over and done with. So, good job, Rosa. She's doing a good job. If you want details of what's going on with Rosa, she did a live stream with Houston Wade. Livecast number 248. Rosa is back to update us on our case. Check it out. They did a Zoom call, and that's pretty cool. Trading Secrets. Ali at Trading Secrets, he did an excellent job. He summarized the 14 points that Rosa went over in her rebuttals to the judge, telling the judge, you have the power. You can do this. And she's right. He does have the power, Grab a pair. Get a pair. You can do this, judge. Okay, anyway. So Ali at Trading Secrets has that. Not only that, he's got a video about it. It's pretty good. Rosa fights back against FINRA. Detailed breakdown debunking FINRA's arguments. She's debunked them all. It's very good. She's done an excellent job. Meanwhile, this video, we'll be talking a little bit about shorts. We won't be going over naked shorting because that's a totally different ball game. I'm going to look over shorts the way they're supposed to be done. And we'll talk to you about how shorting actually works, how a short position works, and what happens during the short. Okay? To that, we will introduce three characters that you may be aware of: Mr. Buyer, Mr. Short, and Ms. Loner. Ms. Loner has a bunch of shares. Nobody else has any shares. Mr. Short has no shares. Mr. Buyer wants those shares. He wants to buy some shares. Ms. Loner doesn't want to sell the shares. She says, I'm fine with the shares. I like my shares. Mr. Short says, I think your company's crap, and I want to short sell your shares. I want to drive the price of that company down. I'm going to destroy that company. That's what Mr. Short's saying. Okay, but he has no shares. He can't do squat. You got nothing. You got nothing, Mr. Short. So Mr. Short says, hey, you know what? I'm going to make up some IOU shares. Okay, I'm going to make up these IOUs, and we're going to treat these IOUs as real shares. He says, yeah, really? You're going to treat IOUs as real shares? He goes, yeah, we're going to treat them as real shares. And he says, hey, look, I'm going to trade these IOUs to Ms. Loner. She's going to give me some real shares. I'm going to borrow the shares from Ms. Loner. She's got my IOUs now. And once I get these real shares, I can sell them in the open market, right? Why should Ms. Loner do this? What benefit is it to her to do this? She's now got a bunch of IOUs instead of real shares. Well, what happens is that she gets this thing called borrow fees. The borrow fees are paid by Mr. Short, and they would go to Ms. Loner, but she has to make a deal where she splits the borrow fees with the broker. So the broker is very happy that Ms. Loner is loaning out her shares and doing something with her shares and generating borrow fees because he gets a cut. Let me repeat, the broker is very happy that Ms. Loner is loaning out her shares because Mr. Broker gets a cut. In the meantime, Mr. Short has shares. Mr. Short has paid borrow fees, but he has some real actual shares at this point in time. It's the way this mechanism works. How much are borrow fees? Why do we care about borrow fees? Can they be a lot? Well, let's look at iBorrowDesk. iBorrowDesk looks at a large broker and sees what the borrow fees are and how many shares are available to be lent out. In this case, we look at stock symbol, or what used to be stock symbol, MMTLP, and we see that on December 12th, the last day of trading, the borrow fee was 40% at this large broker. Not only that, there were 600,000 shares available, so you could sell up to 6,000 shares of stock you did not own and pay a 40% borrow fee, knowing that you have to pay that stock back. Okay, so that's a borrowed short selling. That's short selling with a locate and a borrow. Anyway, so what happens? Mr. Short sells his shares that he had to Mr. Buyer. Mr. Buyer is now very happy because he's got actual shares. He is stupendously happy. He's got his shares. Ms. Loner's got her original shares and a bunch of IOUs. And Mr. Short says, I'm good for the IOUs. Don't worry, I got a bunch of cash in the bank. I can pay the IOUs back. Not a problem. The broker is very happy he's got his cut of the borrow fees. Ms. Loaner is very happy she's got her cut of the borrow fees. What's not to like? Well, if you're a shareholder now, suddenly there's a bunch of shares that popped into his existence, and that's diluted the share price. That's caused a depressive effect to the share price. That's caused price discovery to break. That's not very nice. But anyway, if you're a shareholder, things aren't, you're like, hey, there's too many shares out there now, man. Anyway, suppose you're the company. Do you care that there's a lot of shorts? Well, sure. But anyway, because what happens? Selling shares is how you as a company can generate capital. You can raise capital by selling shares. And by raising that capital, you can use that to fund expansion, grow your business, do whatever. That's the way the world works. But now you can't fund as much capital, or you may not be able to fund any capital because your share price is depressed because you now have fake shares that have come into existence as a result of short selling. And the short sellers never close, as we know. So those fake shares stick around forever. So anyway, what can you as a company do? Well, you might issue a dividend of some dollars. What would happen if you did that? Well, your dividend would go out to all shareholders of shares, right? They would get your dividend. Great. What about these shares that are actually IOUs from Mr. Short? Well, Mr. Short can't pay a dividend, but he can pay the same dollar amount as a dividend, and that's called a payment in lieu. So he takes his dollars, puts it into his account, gives it to Ms. Loaner, the same dollar amount as a dividend would be. That's why it's called a payment in lieu. And as far as Ms. Loaner is concerned, she's got the dividend in terms of cash. Good job. Everything looks the same, right? Not quite. Not quite. The IRS wants to help out little old ladies and little old men who are making most of their income from stock dividends. They don't want to penalize them. In fact, they give them a tax break. It's called a long-term capital gains taxes. So long-term capital gains are some of the lowest taxes you can pay. And they are for dividend payments, and they will show up on your 1099 div. And so you will pay very low taxes with long-term capital gains taxes, right? Long-term capital gains rates. What about this payment in lieu? The payment in lieu, no, that's not a dividend. That's a payment in lieu. So you're paying the standard income taxes on that, which are very high rates, very, very high rates. So Ms. Loaner gets she's actually making less now because of these high income taxes she has to pay because she got a payment in lieu. She didn't get a regular dividend payment. She loaned her shares out. So she did something with her shares that's giving her extra income on top of that. She's not just a passive shareholder. She's a loaner. She's a lender. What happens if the company issues a non-cash dividend? Ooh, can companies do that? Yes, they can. Especially if they're private companies. They can issue out a non-cash dividend, right? What happens then? Well, these suppose they issue out private company shares, right? As opposed to a cash dividend. These private company shares go to their shareholders, right? So shareholders have it. What about a Mr. Short? Can he get a private company share? No, he can't get it. He knows that he needs to owe that to someone. But he can't get the private company shares from anywhere because there's none left. The company only made as many as they needed, right? So these private company shares, they are non-existent as far as the short is concerned. But in either case, he's got to give this debt of private company shares. He's got to give that to Ms. Loaner. Where's he going to get it from? He can't. And Ms. Loaner is going to be out. She's going to be out. So what happens? You've got a bunch of private company shares that can never be delivered. Okay? You've got a bunch of shares out there in the market that have a dilutive effect on the share price. They are depressing the share price, pushing the share price down from where it should be. So that's kind of crap as well, too. Now you've got extra shares out there. So who keeps track of all this stuff? The broker does. The broker keeps track of all the transactions, including who owes what to whom. Right? That's why you have the broker there. The broker deals with share lending, shorting, buying, whatever, right? He deals with all of that, and he adjusts everyone's ledger. He adjusts everyone's books. He connects the various parties together, and he makes sure everything is in his own broker books, right? You may not have access to the broker's books, but it is up to the broker to balance their books and to keep you balanced along with everyone else. That's the way the world works, or it's supposed to work. Now, the broker knows that there's 5,000, 6,000 stocks out there in the world. They may each be doing something slightly different, and they don't want to keep track of that. That's a lot of work, and they're not going to be an expert in every single stock. Probably not. So what do? They subcontract with FINRA. Okay, they get FINRA and the DTCC to issue corporate action notices based upon what they think the broker should do, based upon the fact that there is, FINRA rules and DTCC rules. Okay, so it's up to FINRA to issue out these corporate action notices. Okay, and we know that for the case of MMTLP, it's FINRA who has to tell the broker that the shorts have to close their positions. Let me repeat: it's FINRA who tells the broker that the shorts have to learn to close their positions. That's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Okay. So, so we're waiting for FINRA. Now, FINRA, by the way, they never issued that corporate action notice for MMTLP shorts to close their positions. Let me repeat: FINRA never issued a corporate action notice for MMTLP shorts to close their positions. For all you know, they might still be open today. For all you know. Okay? Now, everything I talked about was about regular shorting. I did not talk about naked shorts. Naked shorts are slightly different in that there are no borrows. Instead, the shares get magically created, right? The market makers have been anointed with various oils, and they are now able to naked short, whereas no one else can. But whether you are naked shorted or regular shorted, all those short shares still need to be reconciled. You cannot have fake synthetic shares out there when the company is going private. That's just the way the world is. Okay. Now, a bunch of people might just say, hey, look, you got to reconcile these short shares. That's going to result in a massive price increase. It's going to be disruptive to the market. Note, FINRA did not say that. But anyway, they might be obvious to a lot of people, right? But I say, look, yes, the price is going to go up. But think about what shorting did. It resulted in price suppression. The price was pushed down because of shorting. The price is just going back to where it should have gone before, right? All that naked shorting, it deprived the company of access to investment capital. Let me repeat, all that naked shorting, it deprived the company of access to investment capital. So if you think about it, any price increase because of the reconciliation, meaning because shorts had to close their positions, and to close their positions, they have to buy to close. Because of that, any price increase is just a reaction to the removal of short suppression. That's what I'm saying. Okay. You had this thing that was a monster, and if everyone else's car breaks down, it's not your fault, right? If you're in a race on the Indy 500 and everyone else's car breaks down, but your monster car keeps going on, then you're in good shape. Right? Anyway, so the larger the price increase, the way I look at it, the greater the price was originally suppressed, is the way I look at it, right? If you're expecting a huge, massive price increase, then you also believe that the stock has been depressed significantly from where it originally should have been. Okay. So anyway, FINRA calls U3 halt on December, starting in December 9th, 2022. At midnight, they called the U3 halt. And you can call the U3 halt for either major disruption to markets or for settlement and clearance problems. They called it for settlement and clearance problems according to documents that was provided. So that means that FINRA is saying that the U3 halt was called because of settlement and clearance issues. And yet after the U3 halt occurred, what happened? We had settlement and clearing problems, right? Basically, what happens is the NextBridge Hydrocarbon shares, not a single one of those shares has appeared in a client's account till today, and it's been about a month or so. All we have are temporary CUSIP numbers. There's not a single evidence that I have seen of any naked hydrocarbons that are not producing there are no shares of, what am I saying? There are no brokers that have delivered NextBridge Hydrocarbon shares to their clients, okay? All that they have delivered are placeholder CUSIPs. Okay? So how many shares are there out there in the world? And why do I care? Why does it matter? Because if there's a lot of these shares that cannot be delivered, and that's a dilutive effect, we got to know. We just got to know. It's going to provide us with a scale of how big the problem is, right? Because everyone should have private company shares, but we don't know how many shares need to be delivered. And there's a difference if you need to deliver 10 million, 40 million, 120 million, or 360 million. We need to know what the scale of the problem is. And that will tell us, what resources may be deployed to deal with it, right? If you look, this is a scene from a movie called Pulp Fiction. And look at the guy in the front. It's Harvey Keitel, right? Harvey Keitel is over here. His name is Mr. Wolf. He's what's called a fixer. He fixes problems. The guys in the back, they got problems. The guys in the back got problems. One guy's got blood all over his shirt, and the other guy's just looking at him, and he's like, oh man, what the F did you do? Anyway, so these guys have problems. The problems they have is that the guy with the blood all over his shirt, he shot a guy in the back. He shot a guy in the head who was sitting in the back seat of a car, and there's blood and brains everywhere. The car is a mess. His shirt is a mess. He looks like a mess. He's afraid he's going to get picked up by the cops. He's just panicking. He doesn't know what to do. Samuel L. Jackson's looking at him, and he's like, oh man, what the F did you do? I ain't going to deal with your mess. So what happens? They call up their boss. Their boss sends over Mr. Wolf. Mr. Wolf is a fixer. He fixes things. But before he can fix things, he needs to know what the scale of the problem is. He needs to know exactly what happened, how big is his problem, what needs to be solved. And he solves the problem, of course. I mean, give me a break. It's Harvey Keitel. He solves the problem. How does he solve the problem? He gets these guys to clean up the brains and the blood in the back seat, put a blanket over it. He cleans up, he cleans up the guy with the bloody shirt and all that, and then he gives him some non-bloody shirt clothes to wear, has him drive over to a place where they can get rid of the car. It's simple. Good job, Harvey Keitel. He's a good fixer. That's basically what FINRA and your brokers are looking for. They're looking for a Harvey Keitel to come in and fix their problems. But what is their problem? Let's look at their problem. These are officially reported numbers from MMTLP from FINRA. This is the official short interest numbers from FINRA. Let's see what that has to say. Let's look at the equity short interest, okay? FINRA's own equity short interest numbers show 4.6 million shares of short interest on November 30th, the last day of November. That's what FINRA says. There's at least 4.6 million shares of short interest on November 30th. Not only that, MMTLP has been placed on the OTC threshold list every single frickin' day in December, all the way up to the last day of trading, and it even went there beyond the last day of trading, including the 9th and the 12th when it shouldn't have been traded. It's been on the OTC threshold list. What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. But anyway, it was on the OTC threshold list. This means not only was it there since every single day in December, it was there ever since October 14th. It's been on the OTC threshold list. What does that mean? If we look at their definition of what the OTC threshold list is, and we look at here, we're here under Rule 4320. You look at Rule 4320, and it says every single day you're on the OTC threshold list, that means you got greater than 10,000 fails to deliver. Greater than 10,000 fails to deliver. Where do these fails to deliver come from? They come from naked shorting. Do all naked shorts result in failures to deliver? No. Most naked shorts do not result in failures to deliver. Only about 1% of them do. So if only about 1% of naked shorts result in fails to deliver, that's a reasonable assumption. That means that there's about 1 million naked shorts every single day for 41 days in stock symbol MMTLP. Jeez. That means that there is a ton of naked shorts. There is a ton of naked shorts. There's a ton of shorts out there. Okay. Not only that, let's look at the very, very last day of trading. Let's see how much shorts there are then. FINRA themselves say, if you take data from their website, this is data that Rosa took from FINRA's website, which means FINRA is aware of it, by the way. FINRA themselves say that there was 9.5 million shares of short volume on December 8th, which was the very last day of trading for MMTLP. That is what FINRA themselves says. That 9.5 million shares were shorted. Not only were 9.5 million shares shorted, there were only 13.7 million shares traded. Most of the trading that took place was basically short selling. That's what this says to me. Smoking gun. So we know that there's a short interest in MMTLP. It's according to FINRA's own equity short interest website. And it's been on the OTC threshold list. We know that. FINRA says they called the U3 halt because they wanted to avoid settlement problems. But we know they had settlement problems for over a month because Nextbridge Hydrocarbon shares have not been delivered to shareholders. Come on, man. So FINRA never talks about the short positions in MMTLP. They never talk about how short positions affect settlement. They never talk about how short positions depress prices. They never, and they never talk about how that short position in MMTLP will affect settlement of Nextbridge Hydrocarbons private company shares. That is a big deal. Is FINRA responsible for the settlement problems of Nextbridge Hydrocarbon shares? Because they performed the U3 halt and that prevented the brokers from reconciling the short shares of MMTLP? I think so. I think this is the problem. FINRA should never have pulled that halt. They should have instead pulled a corporate action, which would have said, hey, look, shorts have to close their positions and you can close your positions. And that's it. Instead, they pulled a U3 halt. Man, what a bunch of losers. Anyway, so we know that if under normal shorting circumstances, there are shares that cannot be delivered because shorts can't get access to them because they're private company shares. That's just the case. But how many shares are there? Okay, how many shares are there? We know that the total amount of longs is equal to the longs plus however many shorts there are, right? Because the number of shorts is equal to the number of fake shares or the IOUs that they put out there. So how many shorts are there? So to that, I think I have an answer, and I'd like to thank Russ Race. Thank you, Russ, for coming up with this survey. Russ put a survey together, and he said he has numbers where he believes that there are no outliers. Let's look at this most conservative of numbers. He says he's got 39.9 million shares counted across 5,941 shareholders. Okay, you divide 39.9 million divided by 5,941 shareholders, you get about 6,700 shares per shareholder. Okay, 6,700 shares per shareholder, 719. Anyway, if you take that number, you multiply it across 65,000 shareholders, you get something like 436 million shares that are circulating. This is just from the average shareholder. These are not from people who have a lot of shares. This is from the average shareholder. What about the whales? What about the people who have a ton of shareholders? What about the outliers? Whales are outliers. They have extra large positions. Let's see what that would be like if we were to add those in. Who are the whales we know of? We know of John McCabe, William Stewart. We know of Greg McCabe, William Stewart, John Berta, and David. Okay, add up their shares, you get 51.29 million shares. Add that to the total of 436 million, and you get something like 488 million total estimated MMTLP shares. 488 million total estimated MMTLP shares. That's a lot of shares. I'm willing to say this is a conservative estimate, but it's probably a very accurate estimate because we're not counting any outliers at all, and we're adding in 4 known outliers that we know about, right? Now, could there be more outliers? Yes. Could the price go up? Yes, it's possible. But this is a minimum, I think, and I think it's a good minimum, okay? Because there are no outliers in this, and we're adding the outliers back in, the ones that we know of at least. So there's 488 million shares that are estimated to be circulating out there. But we know at that time only 165 million shares were issued. What does that mean? That means there's about 322 million excess shares out there. 323 million excess shares out there. Well, that's an interesting number. Anyway, 322 million shares. This gives us an idea of how big the problem is, right? There's basically roughly twice the number of sorry, that's a mistake. That should be 322 million. There's about twice the number of shares out there that were shorted than issued. That's a mistake. This number should be 322. That should be 322. Anyway, there should be about twice as many shares shorted as were issued. So that means that I believe this problem is something in the range of a $300 billion to $500 billion in scale problem. And that's not unreasonable. That's not an unreasonable problem. That's a fixable problem. Harvey Keitel knows how to fix it. Okay, it's fixable. And it's not even that hard to fix, but it's fixable. Why do we know it's fixable? Because of this tweet. Traders who bet against stocks made a killing in 2022 as short sellers netted about $300 billion. They made about $300 billion after all expenses. It's not bad. Not bad. It's fixable. It is a fixable problem. Okay. So it might be a painful problem to fix. Certain people and certain institutions might feel a lot of pain from fixing it, but it's fixable. It can be solved with some capital raises. They just, maybe they need that. Maybe they need to borrow some capital. Maybe they need to borrow some money. Maybe they need to get a cash infusion. That's possible. Who knows? It certainly might affect earnings and bonuses, but hey, it's a very, very fixable problem. This is why I cared. This is why it matters, because I think we're in that reasonable range. This problem can be fixed. And if the problem can be fixed, it probably will be. That's just the way things are. Okay. It is January 13th, 2023. Let me end by saying I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice, and I'm not giving out any legal information either. Now, one last thing. It is a fixable problem. Am I going to go over what the fix is? No, that's for the next video. There are many, many possible fixes. I am just going to go over what one possible fix is, and I think all the longs will do quite well with whatever solution comes up. Anyway, that's just me heading out. So thank you for taking the time to listen. Thanks for watching my video, and good night. Thank you. Goodbye.